The 6 most mysterious beings in the Bible. Number 1. Behemoth. Behemoth is one of the few biblical creatures that historians have long debated, and the academic community is still trying to reach a consensus on many aspects of this creature. We know 2 things about it. It was huge and it had a little boat. The evidence of the little boat shows that it is not an egg-laying animal, and we also know that it was not a herbivorous animal like an ox. Its power lay in its stomach muscles. God seems to delight in describing the wonder of this extraordinary creature, pointing out its size, appetite, and behavior along the way. The image is clear. If work can't compete with Behemoth, how could it compete with the God who created it? The Hebrew word behemoth has the same form as the plural of the Hebrew word bema, which means beast. Perhaps this beast roamed the earth with people. Was Behemoth a hippopotamus? Many people think that God had in mind what we call a hippopotamus, one of the largest, most powerful, and dangerous land animals in the world. Hippopotamuses were definitely known in biblical times, especially in Egypt, where the Romans reduced their population due to the damage they caused to crops. Being a river horse, the hippopotamus is closer to pigs than horses. Its open jaw is an attractive image, but was the behemoth an elephant? According to most biblical apologists, behemoth in Hebrew refers to a 4-legged animal which they believe to be an elephant. The descriptions cannot be attributed to any actual animal. Throughout recorded history, human beings have hunted and killed elephants and domesticated them for various purposes, such as work and war. When the book of Job described the behemoth as the most important of God's ways, so powerful that only he who created it can bring his sword near, it was not an exaggeration. Compared to the terrible and uncontrollable Leviathan, man's pride and greatness are nothing to be proud of. The more humble a man is in the presence of God, the more honored he will be in heaven. Number 2. Leviathan. Leviathan is a large aquatic creature, described in the Bible as a fearsome beast with monstrous ferocity and great power. The Hebrew word for Leviathan has as its root the meaning of coiled or twisted. Isaiah 27:1 speaks of Leviathan as something that the Lord, with his great and mighty wound, will control on that day. The sword is destined to punish Leviathan, the swift serpent, the creature that coils itself and slays the dragon of the sea. Whatever this sea monster was, its strength and savage nature were widely recognized. Even the marine animals, glorified by God, were aware of the imposing nature of this being. The Old Testament makes several mentions of Leviathan, portraying it as a real creature known to people, although they kept their distance due to its formidable reputation. In Psalm 104:25-26, God is praised as the one who created the habitat for Leviathan, possibly to counter the inflated image man has of himself. God used the example of Job to demonstrate how small man is in the grand scheme of things. Chapter 41 of Job offers the most detailed description of Leviathan as a true sea creature. In this passage, God emphasizes the size, strength, and ferocity of this animal. He wonders if it is possible to tame such a creature, emphasizing its immense power. This creature was first mentioned in Job 3:8, where the sailors and fishermen cursed its existence, just as Job cursed the day of his birth with intense emotion. Although usually considered a mythical sea monster or dragon, in the context of Job 41, God seems to consider Leviathan a real and powerful creature. There are differing opinions on its description, some suggesting that it could be an ancient dragon-like dinosaur, while others interpret it as a powerful crocodile. God's aim in describing Leviathan to Job is to show him how powerless he is before this creature. There is nothing Job can do to stop it. Number 3. Cherubim. The cherubim are mentioned in the context of Genesis 3 as a group of heavenly beings created by God, appearing immediately after the fall of Adam and Eve in the hierarchy of angels. The events in the Garden of Eden are recorded as Adam and Eve violating God's command not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They risked stretching out their hands to also reach the tree of life and secure immortality. As a result, they were expelled from the earthly paradise. But what was to stop Adam from trying to return to the garden and disobey God again? God expelled the man and placed cherubim and a flaming sword on the east side of the Garden of Eden to guard the way to the tree of life. These cherubs are mentioned in the Bible as guardians, responsible for declaring man's sinfulness and protecting God's presence from sinners. Even though Adam wanted to return to the Garden of Eden, the cherubs served as constant reminders of his transgression. Just as Israel's high priest could only enter the Holy of Holies once a year, feeling his own unworthiness before God, the cherubim highlighted God's holiness and man's sinfulness. In the Bible, cherubim are described as powerful beings who often represent heavenly elements. Ezekiel describes them with wings, hands, and eyes, symbolizing their divine and watchful nature. As well as protecting God's holy place, they guaranteed human mediators, such as the high priest, access to the divine throne. Because of Christ's sacrifice, the veil of the temple was torn, symbolizing the direct access of all believers to God's presence. Number 4. Melchizedek. Melchizedek, another mysterious character in the Bible, has carried an air of mystery ever since he first appeared in the time of Abraham. The canon of Scripture is a frequently debated topic, as he is mentioned in both the Old and New Testaments. Our epic journey begins with a man called Abraham, whose name reflects his faithfulness. In the Bible, names not only describe but also have authority. For example, the name given by God to Adam meant "of the earth," reflecting his origin. Names in the Bible often reflect the role or characteristics of the individual. An example is Nabal, whose name means fool, illustrating his foolishness. Names can also represent divine hopes or revelations, as is the case with Melchizedek. In Hebrews 7:2, his name means King of Righteousness, or the King is righteous, implying that he is a righteous leader and correct in his actions. Melchizedek is mentioned in Genesis 14, where he presents bread and wine to Abraham as a priest of the Most High God. This title indicates that he worshiped the same God as Abraham, the Most High over all gods. The Melchizedek priesthood predates the Levitical priesthood and is used to explain mysteries about Jesus as the eternal priest. Hebrews makes comparisons between the priesthood of Melchizedek and that of Jesus. In Hebrews 6:20, Jesus is described as high priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 7 provides more information about Melchizedek, describing him as King of Righteousness and King of Salem, which means peace. He is presented as without father, mother, or genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, similar to the Son of God and remaining a priest forever. Abraham recognized Melchizedek's authority by giving him 1/10 of the spoils of battle, demonstrating his acceptance of Melchizedek's priesthood. Although Abraham is considered the father of the Israelites, he submitted to Melchizedek's authority. This priesthood is considered a type of the priesthood of Jesus, who brings peace and is an eternal priest. Melchizedek is a significant figure in biblical history, pointing to deeper truths about Jesus and his role as our high priest. Number 5. The Angel of Death. The Angel of Death is a well-known topic, but what about a destroying angel? The distinction between the two is evident in the book of Exodus. When the Egyptians refused to release the enslaved Israelites, God sent several plagues upon them. The last and most devastating was the 10th plague, which involved the Angel of Death, as mentioned in Exodus 11. The Lord instructed Moses to tell Pharaoh that if he didn't free the Israelites, a final plague would hit him and Egypt. This plague would result in the death of all the firstborn, from Pharaoh's firstborn to the firstborn of the humblest slave, as well as the firstborn of the animals. Egypt had already suffered 9 plagues, and more disasters were to come. However, nothing could compare to the devastation of the 10th plague. While the Egyptian population would face an unprecedented wave of mourning, the Israelites would be spared, as long as they followed the divine instructions to mark their doors with lamb's blood. On that fateful night, the Israelite people's faith in God's plan saved them from death. This event marked a crucial point in history, leading to the exodus of the people of Israel from Egypt. As a consequence of Pharaoh's refusal to obey, both he and his people were exposed to the Lord's wrath on that fateful night when no one slept, as recorded in Exodus 12:29-30. At midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of the Egyptians to the firstborn of the animals, without exception. Pharaoh and his servants, along with all the Egyptian people, rose up in despair, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. The destroying angel spared no one unprepared, not even the king himself. His dark fingers of death touched every Egyptian dwelling, but did not affect those who were God's people. The night was marked by a deafening wail from the Egyptians as a crowd rushed towards the border. Although the term angel of death is used as another name for the destroying angel, there is no clear biblical evidence that a single angel was assigned this role. References in the Bible to a destroying angel indicate heavenly beings who carried out divine judgment on sinners. In Hebrews 11:28, this being is mentioned as the destroyer of the firstborn. Surprisingly, the original Hebrew text of Exodus 12:23 does not explicitly mention an angel, but only states that the destroyer, the one who causes damage, will kill the firstborn of Egypt. Psalm 78 describes the plagues in Egypt and summarizes them as the result of the action of a group of destroying angels. Although the Hebrew word for angel is used, it does not refer to a specific angel. God also sent a heavenly messenger to bring destruction upon the Israelites as a consequence of David's sin in counting the people. As a result, a plague was sent upon Israel, resulting in the death of 70,000 people when the angel stretched out his hand to strike Jerusalem. At that moment, the Lord commanded the angel to cease his destructive action. The angel was on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite when David saw his action and acknowledged his sin before the Lord. Number 6. Seraphim. Seraphim are divine beings created by God to serve and worship. These angelic creatures with 6 wings are continually present at the throne of God. The prophet Isaiah describes the seraphim as fiery angels with 6 wings who surround God when he sits on his exalted throne. Isaiah 6 is the only passage in the Bible that mentions the seraphim, depicting an intense vision of God's heavenly court, where the prophet saw God surrounded by these heavenly beings. The implication is that these angelic attendants are enchanted by God. They seem to have a human form, for Isaiah describes them with faces, hands, and voices. Isaiah 6:1-2. In the year of King Uzziah's death, Isaiah saw the Lord sitting on a high and exalted throne, and the seraphim were above him, each with 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. These angels may appear as burning flames, since the term seraphim derives from the Hebrew verb saraph, which literally means to burn with fire, or more specifically, to destroy with fire. The name may also allude to the seraphim's function as agents of purification. God created the seraphim as sinless creatures, but they should not be confused with God. The importance of the seraphim's closeness to God, combined with their revelatory praise, cannot be underestimated. When the seraphim say that the whole earth is full of His glory, they are witnessing firsthand what comes from heaven. From the supernatural perspective of the seraphim, we can see that God's glory is infinite, indescribably valuable, and so powerful that it cannot be contained in a single realm. His glory bursts through the spiritual sky and overflows all over the earth. This revealed glory allows us to glimpse a holy God. To be holy means to be distinguished and revered. This threefold invocation of the word holy to describe God's sacred nature appears only twice in the Bible, both times by angels, when someone is transported in vision to God's throne. And if the seraphim, pure and holy, show such reverence in the presence of the Lord, how much more should we sinful creatures approach Him with reverence? The angels' reverence for God should remind us of our own arrogance when we rush rashly into His presence, as we so often do because we don't understand His holiness. In Revelation 4, John's vision of the throne of God was similar to Isaiah's in reverence and awe. The living creatures gathered around the throne exclaimed, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." The seraphim also served God as His agents of purification. When Isaiah realized that the heavenly seraphim were covering themselves before God to admit their unworthiness before the Lord, he became aware of his own mortal sin and feared for his life. One of the seraphim took a live coal with tongs from the altar, brought it to Isaiah and touched it to his lips, assuring Isaiah that his guilt had been removed and his sin atoned for. I invite you to share your opinion in the comments if this content was useful to you. I appreciate your support by subscribing, leaving your like, and clicking on one of the 2 videos that will be shown to continue watching together. We can enlighten more minds and expand our understanding. Thank you for being here so far, and may the light guide your path. See you next time.